The opinions expressed in this program reflect only those of the participants and are not necessarily those of the sponsors, management, or staff.
WTBQ.
Oh, good morning, Hudson Valley, my hometown, Warwick. Don't fear the Reaper. Need more cowbell. I'm Dominic Samaroni. Thank you for tuning in with us today on That's Where the Money Is on the Hudson Valley's 93.5 WTBQ, located here in beautiful farm country, Warwick, New York. As you may remember, I own W.F. Sutton & Associates. I'm a private lender, and I also do consulting work for foreclosure defense attorneys. Just Google my company name, and you'll find my website and my Facebook page, W.F. Sutton, because that's where the money is. Thank you, Willie Sutton. Put your seatbelts on, because this is going to be a fast show with tons of information. We're going to be talking about, first, number one, we left off on this subject, foreclosures. We're going to talk about the process and how to stop one, how to rob the bank. Hopefully, people will understand the process and that it's just a bad word. There's worse things in life that you can go through than foreclosure. There's ways to handle things. Not everybody should own a home. Not everybody should be able to keep their home. But there is a process and there are programs to protect homeowners that do want to keep their home if they're financially stable, if they are able. And the process takes some time, so you're not going to get thrown out of your home. The sheriff's not going to come. It's not a movie. It's not a TV show. They're not going to bang on the door and just toss you out. There's different stages and different steps to foreclosure. The first step in the foreclosure process is your default. Once you go 90 days behind on mortgage payments, that's 3 payments delinquent, you'll receive in New York State a 90-day pre-foreclosure filing notice. In other words, a 90-day letter. You'll receive a letter stating that you are now 90 days delinquent, and you have an opportunity to cure the default, or the bank or lender, if they're private, will start the foreclosure process. The foreclosure process then starts, if you don't cure the problem, with a lis pendens. It's a Latin word. Lis pendens is basically telling everybody, putting everybody on notice at the county clerk's office that you are now in default and the bank is starting a foreclosure process and they have rights to the property before everybody else. The next step would be then you get served with a foreclosure notice. Foreclosure notice will lay out all your parameters that you've defaulted. They'll put a summons together that you have to be in court. They'll put a complaint together explaining that you've defaulted, you have certain rights, you borrowed a certain amount of money, you owe a certain amount of money, and the process then begins. You have 20 days to put an answer in once the process server. Don't fear the Reaper. When the Reaper comes to your front door, you have 20 days to put an answer in if you were served personally, and 30 days if you were served by mail. That's when you get a lawyer. The bank got a lawyer. It's time for you to get a lawyer. And when you get a lawyer, you want to find a lawyer that specializes in mortgages, specializes in real estate, and knows the foreclosure process, the foreclosure courts, and how things work. Once you've just, I guess, established a relationship and retained an attorney to represent you, you want to then ask the attorney to put the answer in. He'll file an answer and he'll, in essence, stop the foreclosure process, pause it for a while. Then you have an opportunity to go to court and you'll have mediation. You'll have time to, another chance to work out a deal with the bank and maybe a lower interest rate, and maybe they'll toss some of the payments that you owe on the back end of the loan, as they say, or throw them in the garbage sometimes, and get you back on track if you're financially stable. And financially stable is you have a job, you have an income, you have a paycheck coming in, and you're able to make a payment based on your tax records and your paychecks and your bank statements to make a mortgage payment and get back on your feet. So in a nutshell, that's how the foreclosure process starts, and that's how the foreclosure process is dealt with. So don't fear the reaper. Don't be afraid when you default on the mortgage. I know it's stressful. I hate to see the clients come in with the amount of stress they're under, especially when there's kids involved. The wife's upset. Do we have to move? Do we have to pull the kids out of school? It's a stressful, very stressful situation. I try to take the stress out of it. Unfortunately, there's not enough margaritas in the world to deal with all of the stress, but it's a job. I understand it. I've gone through all the stages for the last 8 years. I've specialized in foreclosure defense, working with the foreclosure defense attorneys. There are ways to deal with the foreclosure and a default on a mortgage. Now, the reason I'm talking about this is not just my hate for banks, as you probably picked up from the last show, but I'm discussing these matters because you may not be in foreclosure yourself. You may have a friend at work. You may have a relative. You may have a neighbor who's going through a lot of stress. And again, like I said, when you go through the stress of foreclosure, unfortunately, the stress trickles down to the kids. And I hate to see the kids have to go through the stress. It affects their schoolwork. It affects their performance in sports. It affects everything that has to do with that kid's day or that kid's life. So there are ways out. There are ways to deal with it. Now, the ways to deal with it, like I said, is to put an answer in and try to get a loan modification. A loan modification, as you've probably heard, is a new word. It's not something we all grew up with. There was no such thing as loan modification back in the 70s or the 80s or even the 90s. It's just came out recently because of the sheer volume of foreclosures that are out there. They had to come up with a way to deal with the foreclosure process. So a loan modification is your first line of defense after retaining an experienced lawyer or someone who's used to working with foreclosures and mortgages and real estate. And you go through the process of the HAMP loan modification process. And in New York State, we're lucky enough to have the mediation process, and that is not in front of a judge. That's in working with an appointed referee of the court. He monitors how these loan modifications go, make sure that the banks are playing fairly and that the borrowers are also complying with the court and the requests and requirements of the bank to get back on track. That process could take a month. It could take... I've seen them happen for 5 years. So you could be in the mediation process, I guess now they're kind of catching up, probably for a year to 2 years, you can go through the mediation process. Another way out of foreclosure, if you're not going to do a loan modification, is a forbearance. And a forbearance is, instead of modifying your loan, lowering your interest rate and lowering your payment, that's your payment plus your arrears divided by sometimes 36 months or 60 months. Not a popular way to go. If you couldn't afford the payment the first time around, you're probably more apt to lean towards the loan modification process. Another way out is a short sale. I discussed this with Taylor. She's looking for property to buy, and she said, what about looking at some of these short sales for sale? Well, if you have patience and you don't need a mortgage and you could pay cash for the house and you're not in a rush to move in, it could be a deal. You could save some money. The homeowner is given time and opportunity through the courts and the mediation process to list the property for sale, and you usually get about 90 days. If it doesn't happen in 90 days, then they're going to follow through with the foreclosure process. As I had mentioned last week, the foreclosure process in New York State is running about 900 days. The 900 days, which is about 3 years, is with an attorney. Without an attorney, it goes a lot faster. They section off these files. They separate them with people that have lawyers and put an answer in, and the ones who didn't. The ones who didn't get a lawyer and didn't put an answer in on the foreclosure complaint is a pretty quick process. That means you've defaulted, and they pretty much cut through the process like a hot knife through butter. So you want to get a lawyer. You're better off. This way you know where your options are. Another way out of foreclosure, another way to fight a foreclosure besides short sale, is a deed in lieu of foreclosure. Now, people say, what's a deed in lieu of foreclosure? Well, you're offering the deed to the bank and say, I give up. Here's the deed. I'll sign it back over to you. There's some strings that are attached. There can't be a second mortgage on the house. There can't be other liens. The bank doesn't want to inherit your problems. So that's why they may be more apt, if you do have a lot of liens and it's not a clean title, they're more apt to go with a foreclosure, because then the judge, after a foreclosure process has gone through, will give you a brand new deed with no liens and no judgments, and it'll be clean. We're going to go to a short break. When I come back, I'm going to finish up with foreclosures, and then we're going to do, of course, some news on banks and some bank bashing.
A comfortable retirement is something everybody wants to have, but planning for it can be frightening. Finding someone you could trust who can make it easy to understand shouldn't be. At Warwick Valley Financial Advisors, planning is what we do, and we do it well. If you'd like to see if we can help you, call us for a free consultation, 845-981-7300. Call us for a free consultation today at 981-7300. We're located in the Clock Tower building at 65 Main Street. Do you know if you'll have enough money to live on during your retirement? Hi, I'm Ken Ford with the Warwick Valley Financial Advisors and host of From Wall Street to Main Street. When speaking with people who are about to retire, their biggest fear is running out of money in retirement. Most tell me that they've never sat down to figure out if their retirement is safe. We listen to your goals and review your entire situation so we can customize a strategy especially for you. We're located in the Clock Tower building here in Warwick. For a free consultation, give us a call, 981-7300.
State Farm, located in the Clock Tower on Main Street in Warwick, providing auto, life, home, and business insurance, as well as banking and retirement planning for your personal and business needs. For a free quote, call 986-7100, stop in, or visit us at warwickins.com.
Turn the pages back to another time at Ye Olde Warwick Bookshop. Enter and you'll feel the comforting environment of what bookstores once were. Ye Olde Warwick Bookshop is a place to come browse, feel, smell, and simply enjoy a good book. In the presence of a wealth of knowledge and stories, you're warmly invited to open the books that will transport you to other worlds and times. At Ye Olde Warwick Bookshop, you'll find everything from new releases to rare old books. Whether you're looking for fiction or nonfiction, it's all there at Ye Olde Warwick Bookshop, 31 Main Street in the heart of the village of Warwick. Call 544-7183. And remember, that great book you just read on your Kindle, you can't pass it along to family or a good friend. Ye Olde Warwick Bookshop, where pages really do turn.
Hi, this is Orange County Executive Steve Newhouse. Join me and my guests every Monday on the Roundtable at 9 a.m. AM 1110, 93.5 FM, WTBQ.
Hey Polka fans, it's Nat the Cat inviting you to join me for an hour of polka fun each and every Sunday morning. For the very best in polkas, waltzes, and obetics, join us at 10 a.m. for the Natalie Gabala Polka Fun Show, Sundays, and it's all here on TBQ.
WTBQ.
Ah, yes. Don't Fear the Reaper. This is my favorite Led Zeppelin song, actually, coming back. But just to finish off with the foreclosure segment, I just want to tell you that, like I said, if you're not in foreclosure, you may know someone who's in foreclosure. It's still an epidemic. We're still dealing with it. Hopefully it'll be over. Everybody asks me all the time, when do you think the foreclosure epidemic will be over so we can get back to banking, mortgages, and selling real estate and buying real estate? I don't see it anywhere in the near future, quite frankly. Last week we talked about how the markets are kind of in a coma and things have been slowing down. A lot of articles popped up the next day after my show about that, so I'm going to talk about that as soon as we finish up with the foreclosure process. So the foreclosure process, I left off on deed in lieu of foreclosure. That's also known as, now it's become a little popular. It was a great idea. It's, in my opinion, it's a terrific way to deal with the foreclosure crisis. Everyone's asking me, how do you speed this process up? What do we have to do to get rid of this foreclosure process? Well, you have to get rid of the foreclosures. You got to get the families out of the houses or get them modified, one or the other. To get them, we talked about modification. Let's talk about moving people out of their homes orderly. The best way to do it, in my opinion, if there's not a lot of liens on the property, there's just the first mortgage and they're in default and they just want to get out, they've had enough of the house, ownership, dream, or nightmare, a deed in lieu of foreclosure, keys for cash. That's where the bank will offer you money to leave the house broom swept. Leave it clean. Don't pour any concrete down the toilets. Don't clog up the pipes. Don't take the copper. Leave the house intact, and they will pay you money. Now, the money could be from $1,500, which may help you with moving truck and moving expenses, to I've had the highest one I've dealt with myself was a $42,000 check from Chase, believe it or not. They paid the client $42,000 to move out of the house. It was a home in Tuxedo, as a matter of fact. It was a big mortgage, big ticket, and they didn't want to be stuck with the house and the foreclosure legal fees. So they paid the family to move. Doesn't always come up $42,000, but the average amount is about $7,500 to $15,000 is what I'm seeing. Last month, we had 3 of them go through. It was $15,000 per homeowner. All 3 homeowners moved out. They received their $15,000, and the bank took the property back and listed it for sale. And that's how that deed in lieu of foreclosure or keys for cash process works. The last nuclear option to deal with a foreclosure, it's not one that I like, but if you have to use the nuclear option, you use it. And that's a Chapter 13 or a Chapter 7. You have to qualify for a Chapter 13 and demonstrate that you have the ability to make the mortgage payments. Chapter 7, you don't necessarily keep the house. It's really to get rid of all your debts to help you maybe qualify for a loan modification. It'll stop a foreclosure sale. Again, it's a nuclear option. I know bankruptcy attorneys use that option first, but pizza parlors sell pizza first. When you go to a bankruptcy attorney, what else is he going to tell you? He's going to tell you, let's go bankrupt. That's usually the firms that I work with do bankruptcies. They are federal attorneys with the federal courts and do bankruptcies, but they usually use it as the last resort. So I'm not an attorney. I don't give out legal advice. This is not legal advice. It's more banking advice from my experience in banking and foreclosing and lending money, and my time in consulting for foreclosure defense attorneys. So I will put that disclaimer in there. I'm not a lawyer. Now, let's move on to get off that part of the show. The foreclosures. If anybody has any questions, they could always call in, or they could look up my website. I'd be happy to answer questions and point you in the right direction when it comes to foreclosures. As you noticed, I only touched on short sales. Short sales are becoming a thing of the past. They didn't work, and they're not working now. Okay, the economy. Last week, I had mentioned that the economy is, I would say, fair to partly cloudy. It's not looking good right now. It's not a strong economy. It's not a big bounce back. It's not a big recovery. We seem to be stuck in park. We don't seem to be moving anywhere. We're still stuck in that economic coma. Now, how does that affect us all? Well, it affects us all because we're all keeping our eye on how's real estate doing, how's banking doing, how's sales doing, because in consumer goods, these things all affect us. These things all make or break us in this country. So right now, the economy is stagnant. We're not going anywhere. The upper class is doing phenomenal. I'm sure there's plenty of traffic out in the Hamptons. I'm sure everybody's drinking champagne cocktails. I'm sure everybody's enjoying themselves. But for everybody else who's at the lower level, it's not that great. So it may be a good time to hunker down, as they say. Don't move, improve is the old slogan. Maybe it's a good time to see, my friends over at the Rowe Brothers and fix the house up. Maybe put in some windows so that when the market bounces back and the windows are done, or the bathroom was done, or the kitchen was done, or maybe you freshened up on paint, then you're ready to sell when the time comes, when the market bounces back. So that's my quick news flash. All the publications that I do read have all come out on Friday after my show, that the mortgage applications, the amount of applications, which is monitored by the mortgage or the Banking Association and Mortgage Professional newspapers, they're all down. Everything's down. So I say just hunker down, enjoy your family, and just stick around the house, do some home improvements. I see Frank out there cutting his grass, throwing his fertilizer on the WTBQ station. Place looks great, so hunker down and enjoy your life. Don't put so much into moving. Maybe just do some improving. I just want to read you a quick quote. One of the founding fathers of the United States was Thomas Jefferson. He had a great quote, and it's actually sends chills up my spine when I read it. And I put it on my Facebook page. Like I said, you can Google W.F. Sutton, and you'll see my website, and you'll see my Facebook page. And I found this, and I put it on, and if it wasn't so lengthy, I would tattoo it on my arm. But he said, if the American people ever allow private banks to control the issuance of their currency, first by inflation, then by deflation, the banks and corporations that will grow up around them will deprive the people of their property until their children will wake up homeless on the continent their fathers conquered. As you can see, Thomas Jefferson was not a fan of big banks. If he saw what was happening with Chase, he'd probably be rolling in his grave like a rotisserie right now. But unfortunately, we're ruled by these 5 families and these big banks. And for the ones who have half a brain cell, they're starting to realize there's alternatives. Don't feed the pig, as they say. Hit the credit unions. Now, I'm hoping next week I'm going to be interviewing my credit union where I have my bank account. I'm meeting with them this afternoon to bring them in and talk about alternatives to too big to fail, or the big banks who rule this country and probably another 100 countries around the globe. Speaking of big banks, just a quick bank bash. I know last week everybody had sent me some texts and liked my bank bashing segment. I'll leave you on this note. Chase. Chase is the biggest bank in the United States. Big bank, got in a lot of trouble. They copped a plea to being investigated for rigging the currency markets last week, one of the biggest settlements. Every time I read about the biggest settlement in American history, it always has Chase after the name, or after the headline for some reason. But I just read this piece about how the mortgages that they wrote were bad. They were bad mortgages. They given out mortgages to people that shouldn't have qualified for mortgages. Then they packaged them and they wrapped them and put a bow on them, and they sold them out to all these investment firms and had 401ks invest in them. They sold them off also to the government-backed Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, which are both now in receivership, also known as bankrupt. And they paid a small portion of the take of the money that they made to keep themselves out of prison. And they're still operating today, and I still see people pulling in and out of the parking lots, depositing their hard-earned paychecks every Friday. It makes me laugh. And the same people that are depositing those monies, those checks into the banks, are the same people that are saying, oh, the banks ruined the country. The banks ruined the country. They did a number on us. Well, if they did a number on us, pick another drive-through. Look into the credit unions. It's a good idea. It's for the country. It's for the kids. It's for the future. We're not going in a great direction. Thomas Jefferson, I think, summed it up the best. We're going to end up in one big happy foreclosure at the rate we're going. But on an optimistic note, there are alternatives. If you don't feed the big banks and deposit your money and do business with the big banks, they can't take that money and gamble it out on Wall Street. That's where they're making the money right now, because they're not lending. I know everybody's talking about getting a mortgage and buying a house and going to their local bank and getting approved for a loan. They're not lending. It's very difficult to get a loan right now. You have to walk on water. You have to have a really good credit rating. You have to have a good down payment in order to get a loan, unless the American government starts buying mortgages again at the taxpayer's expense. That's my bank bashing segment. That's my information on Chase. I'm hoping that next week I come in with the credit union and we discuss the alternatives, the benefits of a credit union, and how the credit unions are different from the banks. And I hope that everybody enjoys their weekend. I hope everybody enjoys the weather. And I hope that you'll at least walk away with a little bit of information from Dominic Samaroni and his show on WTBQ. That's me. That's where the money is. Thank you very much, everybody.
The opinions expressed in this program reflect only those of the participants and are not necessarily those of the sponsors, management, or staff of WTBQ Radio or FST Broadcasting Corporation.
WTBQ